right, everybody, we are going to start off with our first piece of Stormtrooper armor. Just a little bit of a class theory on Stormtrooper armor building. Almost every piece of the Stormtrooper is a half cylinder. So, I mean, if you've got your arm or leg or torso, if you are standing in the middle, let's pretend this can is your body, you're basically covering one side with one piece, the other side with the other, and then they're glued together or fastened together, right? In the case of most of the limbs, they're glued together permanently. For something like the torso, it's hinged on one side with elastics so that you can obviously get in and out. But most of the limbs are glued together. So we are going to talk about how to trim the armor, and then we're going to sand it down, and then we're going to size it to the arm, and we're going to make some pencil marks, tape it in place, and then the next step, which takes a little bit more time, is gluing it together with, in this case, this is going to be like a New Hope Star Wars build, and there's going to be cover strips that'll be joining the two halves, and so those take time to set. So we'll kind of do either a bit of a time lapse thing or pull the finished piece out of the oven. But so as we talked about a little bit earlier, this particular RT armor is made for bigger troopers. We just measured your bicep to make sure this fit.
We measured the guns, and I kind of went.
They're a little bigger than mine.
But, with the arm kind of bent because it gets a bit thicker when, you're fold it in half. So we came up with 16.5 inches.
Cool. And
that's my size.
And just trying it on, even now, untrimmed. And I would recommend trying most armor on with your black undersuit, just to make sure, you don't want to be wearing a sweatshirt or something like that when you're trying this on. But there's actually quite a bit of room there, right?
So even my 16.5, there's still, you could probably get another 17.5 in there.
Absolutely. And if need be, it could be shimmed, glued wider. But remember, we're going to be actually trimming these pieces first. So that's going to increase the circumference of the armor and even provide a little bit more room. But it's pretty scratchy right now. So these come kind of what they call close trim. So they're kind of pre-cut like that. On some other armor makes that I've worked on, a lot of the plastic's still there, and you have to cut the whole, the ends off, right? These sort of bulkheads off.
Yeah, this just makes it just that little bit more easier.
Yeah. So how I usually start is I try and clean up and trim off these return edges. And so what happened was on the original armor, the original armor was made out of really thin plastic, and so they added these sort of return edges to give the appearance that the armor was thick and
more substantial, like
armory,
proper armor.
Yeah,
that's the word.
So what I usually do is I'll take a pencil, and for the arms I'll leave about 1/8 of an inch. The originals were really eyeballed, just so you know too. I mean, it was people taking X-Actos and whatnot, and just kind of eyeballing and cutting a thing out because they weren't going to be looked at that closely. But nowadays, people want to be a little bit more accurate, or they want to have a little bit more information about how much of a return edge or what the actual dimensions are. So for these return edges on the arms, we're going to leave about 1/8 of an inch. And we're just using an old, my old woodshop carpentry teacher.
Woodshop 101.
Yeah, taught me this, where you just use the edge of your finger and then hold your pencil.
And don't do that.
And run it around like that. And this just gives like a bit of a guide so that we're not kind of randomly cutting willy-nilly all over the place. But see how that works? Right. Hopefully that pencil line's showing up there.
Well, that's going to put you well into the ballpark. You'll be close enough.
Right. So now we've got these funky little scissors. These are called Lexan scissors, and they're actually made for trimming RC car bodies. So when you get your RC car, it's actually like a vacuum-formed clear shell, and then they cut the wheel wells out. They'll usually have like an indentation where the wheel will go. And so you need to cut that out. So they make these scissors that are curved. They also make straight versions as well, too. And they're awesome for cutting this ABS plastic.
Well, just much more control. You could try to do it with the X-Acto knife, but obviously you run the risk of a slip left, right, and wrecking the piece.
Or cutting your finger off.
There's that, too. I think this is a great idea. Like, this would be a good investment to get a...
Yeah. They're only a few dollars, and you can find them online. So I'm just going to hold this up nice and close to the camera so you can see. And Rob's going to cut out his other piece over there.
On this one.
And you can see. Now, the reason why people, they see these and they're like, those are tiny. Like, look at the size of your hand. Those are tiny scissors. But the whole idea is that there's tons of leverage. The arms of the scissors are really long, and then the cutting part is really small. So you can just, work these around. And because the blades are curved, they work around these tight curves really, really well. A lot of people are tempted to get like tin metal or tin snips, sheet metal shears and stuff like that that's really big.
Too big.
You don't really need that for armor. So you can see it kind of does this little bit of a scissory rough edge there, but that's okay because we have...
Much better already.
Yeah,
Look at that.
we got sandpaper. So this is just, like a 120 grit, but you can use 150. And what you want to do is just clean off that sharp edge so that when you're testing the armor out, it doesn't scratch you up too bad. And also when you're wearing it, it doesn't cut into your undersuit or give you serious armor bites. Yeah, there you go. So that just kind of softens that up. So that's one side. Now we're going to do the other side. Okay. This has become a bit of like therapeutic. I've done so many of these, but it's always a little bit of like, I love the smell of plastic in the morning. Actually, that's a bad idea. Kids, if you're watching this on YouTube, wear a dust mask and be aware that whatever surface you're working on, you're going to be leaving all these little trimmings and little bits of plastic and plastic sort of particles too. So for the purpose of the video, we need to kind of talk into the mic and have a bit of a clearer voice, but normally it's a good idea to wear a dust mask or a respirator when you're doing this kind of stuff, because your parents probably don't want, all this plastic residue all over the place. As mentioned earlier, I'm using a 120 grit right now. You can use a finer sandpaper if you want to kind of like smooth out that edge even more, but I find this works out really well for getting started, getting going. So Rob's just finishing up his...
Working on the
inner bicep there. And so these videos will show one limb, one side, and then the other side will be done kind of after the fact. But then this just gives you an idea of how it's put together. And
right.
We're good. So let's try this on again. We'll size it up to your arm and see how things go. All right. So hopefully it's looser, right? There's a little bit more room.
Yep.
So what you want to do in terms of sizing is you want to flatten your arm up just a little bit here. What you want to do in terms of sizing is the original cover strips. There was a strip of plastic that would be glued on top. They were about 15 to 17 millimeters in width. Now you can deviate from that a little bit because this kit is a bigger kit, bigger armor for huskier troopers. So if it's 17, if it's 18, that's probably fine, but you don't want to go much bigger than that. So usually what you want to do when you size up this armor is see how much you can close it up without it being really tight and constricting. Mm-hmm. And I can feel that there's a little bit more of an overlap in the back than there is in the front. So what I'm trying to do is make sure that the halves are symmetrical and even like this. I'm not trying to close it up like that or like this. I'm trying to make sure that they're even, right? Once I do, I'm just going to leave that there for a sec. And I've got my trusty blue tape.
Blue tape.
And people ask me why I like to use this blue tape. And the blue tape's good because it's sticky. That sounds really obvious. But it also comes off really easily, right? So I'm just going to get these pieces on there so that I can actually holding it on, holding the armor in place. But then what we're going to do is figure out the sizing. So
we'll take a look at how much overlap we have on each side and then kind of figure out
exactly split the difference, right?
Ground.
Yeah. So if I kind of get that to where that needs to be, and I'm sort of, if I was doing this, away from the camera, I'd be looking at both sides to make sure that it's in the right place. In this case, I'm trying to tape it, and I can feel how much of an overlap there's going to be. And then what I'll do is, I'm just going to turn your arm again, sorry, is you can mark it with a pencil line on both sides, and then use that as a guide to, right, make sure that you've split the difference evenly, right? So now we can peel it off, and we can check to see if it's correct or not. And even if it's a bit off, that's okay. So you can see here, obviously there's way more overlap on one side than there's in the other, but we're going to eyeball it, do a little bit of math, and kind of get it, so it was more positioned like so. We're going to move it so that it's a little bit more even. And then when we do, we are going to cut that, okay? So let's do that right now. So right now it's kind of, it's about 1 inch on this side, and I'm a goofball. I only left about 1/4 of an inch, so it's probably going to be about 1/2 inch on each side. And it's almost, you can see these lines are almost perpendicular, or sorry, parallel to where they were supposed to be. So I am going to guesstimate that if we took about 1/2 inch off on both sides and we taped it back together, it's probably going to fit. So
we'll tape it up with those lines.
Well, actually, I'm going to back up a bit.
Okay.
So one thing that is happening on this armor is there is this ridge that's actually already formed on the back piece. And because we're going to be gluing a 15 millimeter strip, or 17, whatever you want to call it, on top, you don't want to leave that much of this ridge exposed. So what I'm going to do is actually, which I probably should have done ahead of time, cut a little strip so that we can kind of see where it lies. And then we're going to move it and position it so that as little of this ridge is visible as possible. We want the plastic strip to like almost but not quite cover that ridge. So I'm going to edit the video right here, and magically there'll be a strip that will appear right here. All right, through the magic of editing, we've got our cover strip. This is now a 17 millimeter wide cover strip. As we mentioned earlier on the arms, most of the time it's about 15, but because it's a little bit bigger armor, we can go 17, and those measurements aren't exact. They were kind of eyeballed back in the day, right? So what we need to do is figure out how long the cover strip needs to be and also how wide. What we want to do is when we're actually gluing the halves together, we want this cover strip to cover half of one side of the armor and half of the other side. But at the same time, we only want the cover strip ideally to have about that much showing on that ridge. We don't want to, in a perfect world, you don't want to do that. If you're a bigger guy and the armor needs to be spread apart and you have to do that, then that's what you have to do, which isn't the worst thing in the world. Or you could use a slightly wider cover strip. But it's hard for me to kind of tell you exactly what size it needs to be because it's all dependent on your own body and arm size. So in this particular case, I'm just going to mark the length of this first. And one issue that I noticed that people seem to do is they make their cover strips too short. They either make them a hair less than the length of the armor, or they just put it right to the end. I like to just go like a hair over that because I find when you trim it, whether you're using scissors or an X-Acto or whatever, you got to take into account the blade or the scissors and the sanding and stuff too. So I'll just make it like a hair longer, and then we cut it out. So you can take your steel ruler, put it on top, score it a couple times, and then we're going to do a little score and snap. All right, so that's going to be the length of that piece. And in a perfect world, well, actually not in a perfect world, but you'll probably find the cover strip is not going to be the same length on the other side, but that's okay. We're going to cut another strip anyway. So, so if we're taking a look at the armor, we know that this armor is already a little bit big for Rob's arm, and so we know we're going to be able to trim some of this plastic off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a pencil mark that basically indicates where the halfway point of this ridge is. And I'm going to trim that off on both sides, and then that'll give me the proper sizing of this back bicep, or back of the arm. What is that, tricep? Is that
Bicep. That's the bicep.
Right, but this is...
Oh, the back of the arm.
The back of... That's
you
a
are correct.
tricep muscle,
Tricep.
isn't it? Oh, okay. See? High school, PE class and all that kind of thing. So, now you can use scissors to cut it. You can also attempt to rest it over the edge of a table and use a steel ruler as a guide and cut it. It's totally up to you. In this particular case, I'm going to use the scissors because it's easier, and it doesn't need to be perfectly, perfectly, perfectly razor straight.
Because it's going to be hidden by the strip.
It's going to be hidden by the strip. Yeah, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to cut that off right there. I'm going to do the same on this side. If you want to, you can clean up those edges with a bit of sandpaper, but just like Rob mentioned, you're not really going to see the inside, so it's not super, super critical. But one thing that I do like to do while the armor is trimmed like this is I like to sand a bit of the inside. All right? And I'll show you why in a little bit. And since the armor is here, I also like to sand the outside of this ridge because that's the surface where the cover strip is going to be glued. So I know sometimes people try to attempt to glue it without sanding it, but that's kind of a bad idea because we're going to be using E6000.
You'll get
cement.
a much better bond. Much better bond.
And it just anytime you sand surfaces before you glue something, in any kind of prop or costume or hobby making, even construction, plumbers even sand their stuff. All right, so that's the back of the bicep, tricep, whatever you want to call it, bicep armor, and we trimmed it out. Sides are all good. Now that we've got this, we're going to size it up again. Let's take a look, and we'll take a look at our pencil marks. Let's go right there, and I'm trying to feel the back, and that's not too bad actually. I could probably go a little bit closer in the top there, right?
Yeah, there's lots of room at the top. You could probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tape that again. Try to just make this not fall off the table. So I'm going to size that up. How's that feel?
That's good.
That's good? Okay, so I'll tape the back too. Still hold it there, and I'm just going to make a couple pencil marks where I'm going to trim. So what I'm trying to do is indicate with pencil marks where I'm going to be trimming the inner bicep. And Rob's going to turn his arm around so I can do the other side. You took a shower this morning, right?
I think so.
Okay. He smells pretty clean. All right, so now we're going to take this off. And you can see these. I know we've drawn a bunch of pencil lines all over the place, but I'm the person that did it. I kind of know where the lines are. So it's this one and this one. We're going to draw a straight line between the two. And you can see it's a little bit tapered, right? It's a little bit wider at the top than it is at the bottom because that's the way his arm is. That's just the way we're going to do it. And same with this side. It's the darker marks here. So it's almost, I got it pretty good. I got it pretty even on both sides. Okay, so now we're going to trim those out. Do you ever get nervous knowing that this is your armor and somebody else is cutting it out? And that I might screw it up?
No, I trust you. I
Awesome.
trust you implicitly.
Yeah, I've done this before.
A few times, I gather.
I play a professional on TV. There we go. Gonna do this side. You can basically follow these same principles for every piece of the armor. But I always like to tell people to start with the bicep because it's the easiest. It's like 2 cylinders. The shapes aren't really complex. It's just it's a really nice, simple piece to start with. Now, before I try that on again, I do like to sand this edge a bit, and I actually like to sand these sharp corners because every time you test fit something on, it kind of scratches and you end up with all these marks on your arm. So I just like to do that a bit. And then again, while I'm here, I'm going to sand this outer surface where that cover strip is going to get joined, right? I'm just eyeballing it here, but I know that it's 7 or 8 millimeters worth of plastic. So I just kind of hold the sandpaper on the edge there, and then that's sanded, and I'll do that here too. I know it seems kind of, you might say, well, why don't you just do that all at the end? But I'm kind of holding the armor right now, and I like to just sort of do stuff so that when I'm gluing the pieces together, everything goes together really quickly. And don't worry about these pencil marks. You can just take a bit of alcohol and you can just clean that off. Yeah.
So now this is when we would tape it together as a test fit?
Yep.
So they're butting up against each other.
This is butt join, yeah. So let's talk about that for just a sec. So back in the day, people used to do what they call overlap assembly, where you would overlap one piece on the other and just glue it together. A lot of people really like to do the butt join now, where the two pieces butt together and it's covered with a cover strip. It's a little bit more accurate.
Yeah, more consistent with the originals.
Yeah, and that's just the way it was done. So that's what we're going to be doing with this one. So we're going to tape that together. You can see the pieces are butted together. And we're going to size this up again. So you can slide that on your arm. Actually, wait a minute. Yeah, let's try that. We'll just tape it up. And we'll slide it on your arm. Oops. Yeah. So much easier with a second set of hands. It's like it'd be an octopus to glue this. Okay, so now that's nice.
Theoretically, this should just slip on as a nice pre-fit.
Wow. It's like a glove. Good. And there's a hair bit of room there. Again, we don't have the undersuit on, but that should be fine for your fit.
And even if it wasn't, again, this is the time where you would go in and maybe take a little bit more off the inner to adjust it.
Yeah. But it fits pretty good so far, right?
Yeah, that's a good fit.
Cool. Awesome. And enough that you can flex your arm and it's not
lots of room
binding
there.
Or anything. Yeah.
Yeah, if I kind of run it to the outside, like say the bicep.
Right. There you go.
Yeah, well, that fits
cool.
great.
Awesome. So there we go. And that's how you size up and trim and sand the bicep. The next segment, you're going to see it glued together. Awesome.